Welcome to Field Trials, a future farming webcast exploring innovations, issues, and perspectives in new farm technology. This is Matt, your Canadian farm kid and journalist host. Thanks for tuning in. Will your next tractor have a cab? Well, it's hard to say. This episode of Field Trials features Ian McDonald, Crop Innovation Specialist for the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture. We discuss a variety of things, including why some developers have focused on designing cab-free autonomous equipment, why some haven't, transportation restrictions, and the significance of scale. I'm here with Ian McDonald. Ian, thanks for joining us for a chat.
Pleasure to be here, Matt.
And you're a bit of a I don't know what the term you would use, but you seem like a bit of a jack of all trades with all of this ag tech stuff. But specifically today, we're talking about cabs versus cabless tractors. Why I would have one, what they're good for, maybe what they're not good for. And I have no expertise on this whatsoever, so this is all you, Ian. But why would I have a cabless tractor? My gut would be to have something with a cab on it, so that if I have to drive it, I can drive it. If something goes wrong or what have you. But obviously, there's some other considerations there. Why would I want a cabless tractor?
So, just a bit of context first, especially in the North American context. The current emphasis is on robotic activity in horticultural crops, where there's smaller acreages, more sort of management concentration and stuff, and more problems because there's not as much herbicide and other crop protection options available in some of the hort sectors. So scale really comes into play. Some of these robots are really small. They look like little beer coolers on wheels, and because of that, they are going to be deployed to fields probably in groups, or what they're calling swarms. Mm-hmm. So how do you replace a 12-row planter? Well, you don't replace it with one row robot. You replace it with several row robots, type of thing. And so that makes no sense to have a cab on something of that scale. You're just going to load it on a trailer and it's going to go out to the field. And depending on whether it's a weeding robot or a seeding robot, it'll come back and it'll get charged at the trailer. It'll get filled with seed to go back out and continue to finish the deployment job that it's been given, or that they have been given in series. And those little robots will all communicate together so that they know that they've covered everything. As you move up in scale, again, what breaks it down is the robotic sort of innovation coming from the long-term OEM farm equipment side of things, or is it coming from the new entrants that are coming out of military, automotive, industrial engineering, and some of these things where some pretty brilliant engineers and that are engaging, and they don't have the agriculture baggage, I'll call it, in what a power unit needs to look like, right? And so again, what is the purpose of that robot, and does it need to do multiple things? Does it need to be driven to the field, or in many cases, some of these robots may be dedicated to a field for the season. So once you get it out there, it just stays in that defined landscape and works its way across it, on a weekly basis, or it may even take a week to cover a whole field, because if you're going down the rows picking out every single little weed between the plants within the corn row or the squash row or whatever, that's going to take a long period of time, right? Others are being attached to current tractors. So there's a company in California making a really interesting laser robot for weeding, but the drive, even though it's got to be ultra slow, so bull low gear, it's human driven on a 3-point inch of a tractor, mm-hmm. And then the robot does its thing. As you get bigger, and I'll use the example of John Deere, they have a new one out. I don't know what they call it. I call it the brick, because it looks like a great big green brick, and it kind of has a 3-point hitch on the front and the back. And the 3-point hitch on the front, actually, you use your controller to drive it up to a cab and then hook up the cab, and then you drive it out to the field, and you drop the cab off on the edge of the field, and then you send the big robot out into the field to work autonomously but you sit in the nice cushy cab to kind of watch it and manage other aspects of the business on the phone, on the computer, that type of thing. So
portable office, essentially.
Exactly. Will that sell? I don't know. It's the Wild West, right? It's just, we are on the cusp of something pretty monumental in terms of disruptive change that will come to field crop agriculture. So there's a lot of unknowns, but yeah, I guess that's what I would comment so far on.
Yeah, every time I get into our old Ford 7700 or the 4000 or something, I think about that. Like, I don't, it makes me wonder, I guess, if it's job specific. Like, let's look at something like, I always mention this one because it's stuck in my mind, probably from covering it so much, but look at something like the DOT, or what's the Omnipower platform?
Omnipower, yeah,
whatever it's called now, which you have direct experience with working with some colleagues here in Ontario. Something like that. I mean, if I have the acreage to leave it in a field, like if I'm out west, or if I got a lot of stuff, then you have the implements there. That makes a lot of sense to me. Personally, we're smaller times, so I would see a lot more value in what you described, the swarm technology and all of that. But still, if I can't put it in the back of a trailer, or I can't throw it on something to transport it elsewhere, I really do want to have the ability to drive that. And I just wonder if, like you mentioned, John Deere, I remember seeing, I don't know when it was exactly, but John Deere, Case, whoever came out with these huge, truly huge machines. And I think they kind of flopped originally, partially because of this concern, like, well, if I have to drive it somewhere, or if I want to drive it somewhere, but I can't, like what do I do, right? I feel kind of stuck. Is that still kind of a valid concern with the amount of tech that we have coming out now, or is that kind of null?
I yes and no, and it's because of, we haven't got to the autonomy on the road with the cars, let alone the farm equipment, right? And so I've talked to the Raven people in Saskatchewan about the Omnipower and stuff like that, and like it can't be driven on the road legally now because it's too wide and too slow and too whatever, right? So and doesn't have an operator, even though they have an electronic tether system whereby it's tethered to a pickup truck, and you drive the pickup truck ahead and it follows you all the way down the road into the field type of thing. But that's not good enough for the provincial ministries of transport and stuff yet. And so in my conversation with the industry guys, ag wise, they're saying that's not our problem. We're going to let the automotive side fix that problem and get to that solution, and then we'll adopt what is necessary to make that work. Because think of the idea of the cars in the cities where you and I share a car and your office hours are different than mine, and it autonomously goes between the two offices to pick us up and take us home. So it's getting there without an operator. So it's that type of thinking too, right? And again, eventually the goal is not to have the operator right there in the field. You will still be connected through your device to that thing, but you could be in Timbuktu in terms of operating it. But on the other hand, in many cases, people still have to be engaged in that because you need the logistics of filling it with whatever it's got to be able to do out in the field, right? So there will always be ongoing sort of human connection to each of those robot platforms and stuff. So it's tough to know how it will all develop. I think the scale will really play into it, right? If it's going to be in a hort field, like at the muck station, at the muck up in New Holland Marsh, and it's going to be in that celery field for the season, then it doesn't need to have that, and it's going to be a smaller thing and such. So yeah, it's a lot of unknowns, I think. Intriguing, but just unknown at this point.
A lot of unknowns indeed. And I suppose just the idea that, I mean, if you can have something that's dedicated, you're not going to be relying on that to move wagons around anyway. So that kind of negates a little bit of that, the concern of being able to drive it in the first place.
Well, I kind of chuckle, right? Because I'm working on a project right now that we needed some tractors to do, and there was no way I was going to get them from a farmer at this time of year because
Yep.
they're all hooked up to some implement that's getting ready to go out and plant or work the ground or whatever it is to get the 2022 crop in the ground, right? How many of these tractors hooked up to a disc or a cultivator or the planter or the seed drill or whatever are really switching in season from one implement to another? That used to be the way. I question whether that's the way now on the larger progressive farms. The tractor, although it's multi-use, is essentially dedicated to a single use for a certain part of the season, right?
Awesome. Well, that's interesting cultural introspection and prospect, I have to say. Definitely something I'm going to have to get used to.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you got something out of the conversation. As ever, the idea is to explore topics, items, and perspectives in the ag tech space. So if you're interested in sharing your own perspective and joining us for a conversation, feel free to get in touch with the Future Farming team at futurefarming.com. You can also reach me directly at FurRural on Twitter. That's at FERRURAL on Twitter, or via ruralphilosopher.com. Thanks again for listening.